Crouching over her, he remembers her words about not knowing how to be a bad boy. He caresses her face and asks if she'll give him another chance to be the prototype of her character. Running his fingers along her lips, he demands one requirement the writer must tell him clearly. What does she want him to do with her in this recap manhwa? The situation feels strange to the protagonist. The director asks her something, but suddenly she struggles to breathe and can't concentrate. Once again, she feels that strange, rapid tingle. Inside her, without resisting the impulse to kiss her, Shin quickly approaches Yu, but accidentally bumps his forehead against her chin. The man grabs his bruised chin while the woman rubs her forehead and tries to explain her clumsiness. Although Ju admits it hurts a little, he now knows for sure what he wants. Shin takes off her glasses and holds her face with his warm hands, asking Shin to just tell him directly next time. And then he kisses her tenderly on the lips. However, the woman suddenly pushes him away, and the man doesn't understand why she reacts. If she herself was getting close to him. Shin excuses himself, saying he was drunk, although deep down he knows he really wanted her. He tries to convince Ju that it didn't mean anything, but he hugs her around the waist and pulls her closer. The man reminds her of his words about the beating of her heart when they are together and how that inspires her. However, it seems she isn't very good at lying. She wants to know if Shin lied when he said all that. The writer blushes and confesses that she just realized it was true. While the girl keeps looking for excuses, Yu leans in and kisses her softly. On her crown, he asks her to tell him what bad boy she imagined, because only then can he be who she really needs. But Shin doesn't want to say anything now while drunk, because he's afraid of saying something weird again. Ju insists that the girl say right now what she wants, because that way she'll be more honest. However, the protagonist feels he's too drunk. And now Ju Won-cha is very different from the image she had of him. The girl's words make the man reflect. Ji-ju grabs his head and bends down, surprised that he forgot so much. Then he gets up, puts on his coat, and apologizes to Shin for crossing the line. In the end, he points out that, at least now, he knows what can happen when he gets drunk. The man leaves, leaving the girl standing there in total bewilderment. The next day at the office, editor Kim surprises the director by the drinks bar. But upon greeting him, she notices how down and pale he looks. Ju affirms that he is fine and asks why the editor wanted to talk. Kim informs him that since he didn't return to the office yesterday and arrived late today, he left all the documents on his desk. Ju suddenly shudders because it seems the girl asked about Mrs. Shin when he was left alone. The man drinks water and looks out the window, reflecting on the previous night. His behavior surprises him, but he justifies it by saying he has been working a lot lately and hasn't drunk in a while. However, he's scared to imagine what could have happened if Shin hadn't rejected him in front of Ju. The flushed and scared face of the girl reappears, annoying him with his own thoughts about the naive writer who finds herself in a complicated situation. The man scolds himself, surprised that he's behaving this way because he feels so unsatisfied and disillusioned. Ju reviews the conversation with Shin again, because yesterday, after making sure she got home, he simply didn't respond to her message. The last message he sent her was advice to get home as soon as possible. However, Ju thinks it would be weird to respond to that now and puts his phone in his pocket. Shin sits at home, in front of her computer, drinks beer, and quickly writes a text describing the events of yesterday to him. It comes easy to her because when she describes a real story, it feels like she writes by herself. The writer is satisfied with her work, but suddenly realizes that she really kissed her director yesterday. And Shin, overwhelmed with embarrassment, is about to die, not knowing how to look him in the eye now. And although for her, it was her first kiss, Yu clearly has a lot of experience in such matters, since he doesn't even text her now, convincing her that yesterday he was just fulfilling his obligations as a prototype. Shin focuses back on her work. 7 days have passed since then, and everyone's life goes on as normal. Young Won-cha convinces himself that the girl hasn't texted him, all this time because she's too busy. Meanwhile, Shin can't concentrate and feels empty, as if her heart has been broken. On one of those work days, the writer decides to leave home to grab a cold coffee and clear her thoughts. She sits by the window to watch people and regrets not bringing her laptop. Shin watches office workers and feels envy as they work even at night, and then have freedom. Her legs automatically lead her to a cafe near Director Cha's office. Just when she tries to convince herself that she just wants to walk more, a man enters the cafe, places his order, and the barista starts preparing an Americano. While he waits, he looks around and suddenly notices the girl sitting by the display. At that moment, Shin can't stop thinking about Young Won-cha, who's surely working. She wishes to see him again, but can't force herself to text him first. The director hadn't contacted her in a week and was probably busy even on weekends, even though he himself told her she could text him any time. Shin can't overcome her shyness, absorbed. In those thoughts, she doesn't notice that Snoo is approaching her. At that moment, a great idea pops into her head, and she jumps out of her chair immediately. However, as she stands up suddenly, Shin bumps into the guy's tray, and the coffee glass tips over. Sonu manages to catch the glass, but the coffee still spills on his shirt. The girl looks surprised at the well-dressed young man trying to understand what he's doing here. The protagonist runs to get wet wipes, but Sonu stops her, closing his jacket to hide the stain. The boy sits next to the girl, surprised to find himself in such a place. He doesn't recognize Shin as his girlfriend, since today for some reason she decided to dress up. The protagonist blames herself since she hoped never to encounter Sonu. Like this. The boy asks what she's doing there, and Shin without turning replies that she was just walking nearby. Sonu explains that he came here because he has a job interview in one of the buildings, feeling guilty about the stained tie. The girl wants to buy him a new one immediately, but the boy stops her again and says everything will be fine. But if that really worries her, he can give her his number, so if something goes wrong in the interview, he can call her and tell her. Meanwhile, Ju Won-cha is having lunch at a restaurant with his employee discussing the previous meeting. The man receives a message, apologizes to the director, and asks for permission to respond. The director waits patiently while the employee finishes writing. After he finishes, he apologizes again and explains that his girlfriend had an urgent question. Ju doesn't really understand why it couldn't wait. Then the man explains that he and his girlfriend had many arguments for not responding to her messages immediately. Although she understands they can't see each other frequently because he's busy, she feels uneasy when they aren't in contact. Ju Won-cha listens carefully to the young employee and recalls that he still hasn't responded to Mrs. Shin. After lunch, the two men return to the office. On the way, they notice a new dessert shop, clearly so popular that there's a line. Ju remembers that editor Kim mentioned this place and wanted to come when it opened. He suggests buying desserts there and offering them to the employees at the next meeting. The men enter the shop. They buy cakes for the employees, and the director takes one for himself. The employee suggests he also get coffee so it won't be too sweet. On the way, he tries to figure out if the director is taking the desserts just for himself or if he has a girlfriend sighing. Ju repeats that he plans to eat it all himself. As they pass by a cafe, he suddenly sees her through the window. Shinara is sitting there while trying to understand what she's doing in this neighborhood. An employee encourages him to go in for a coffee. However, the director flatly rejects and continues on his way, desperately trying to avoid giving his number to Sun. Shin opens her bag, hoping to find napkins to clean the stain. Meanwhile, the boy comments jokingly that he refuses to give his number, even though it was her who ruined his interview. Suddenly, he falls silent when the girl leans over him and takes off his tie. As she undoes the previous one, she pulls out a new tie from the box and offers it to the boy. Sun would have found it impossible to recognize her since when she left the shop. That day, she came back and exchanged it for another, after saying they were matching and wishing him luck in the interview. Shin runs out of the cafe. As she steps out onto the street, the girl tries to catch her breath now that she has solved the issue with Sun. Shin plans to contact the director, which she has been considering for a while. Meanwhile, Ju sitting in the office glares at his phone, angry for not receiving a message from Shin. Even though she was supposed to pass by that neighborhood, he tries to push those thoughts away, but the image of the writer dressed up, sitting in the cafe with that boy doesn't leave him. The fact that Sun was in a business suit makes Ju think that Shin went to cheer on her friend before the interview. In the conference room, they announce the start of the meeting, and the director gets up from the table to join the staff. Just as he approaches the door, his phone rings. Behind him, a message from the writer appears on the screen. Shadows loom over the city. The lights turn on in the offices and homes, and the streetlights illuminate the darkened streets. Shin decided to contact the director in the way. That feels most natural to her. She planned to approach his office and meet with him there after work. She clearly imagined how surprised Yu would be to see her there, and how afterward he would propose they have dinner together. However, when she texted him to say she wanted to talk, the director replied that he had plans for today. The protagonist feels so stupid that she's about to bang her head against the wall she was leaning on while waiting for a response. Deciding there's nothing more to be done, Shin is about to leave for home when suddenly she hears a voice behind her. Director Cha bids farewell to his employees after a long and productive meeting. While the others talk about how they'll spend Friday afternoon, Ju walks away and pulls out his phone. But checking the messages, anger resurges strongly within him. Shin, although she mentioned she wanted to talk about something, never answered his question. He had replied immediately after the meeting ended. Ju worries that something may have happened, since the girl still hasn't responded to him even though she surely read his message. Meanwhile, an unknown boy approaches Shin to ask if she needs help. He has been observing the girl for a while, and thought she looked troubled. The protagonist smiles and replies that everything is fine. Suddenly visualizes clearly how she must have seemed absurd in the eyes of others spending hours still in one place. Suddenly, the boy asks for Shin's phone number. However, for a moment, the girl is at a loss for words. Realizing that behind him a familiar situation appears, DJ Wancha approaches them looking tired. Without letting go of the phone, his gaze is so threatening toward the unknown guy next to Shin that he starts to tremble in fear. Less than a couple of seconds later, the boy disappears, and Ju, turning to the girl, asks her what the boy wanted to talk about. She says she was going to call him since she didn't get a response to her message. Shin apologizes and replies that she was just passing by and had something on her mind, so she decided to text him. Upon hearing this, Ju smiles mischievously and asks if it was really by chance or if she planned to meet someone. Here, without looking him in the eye, Shin replies that she was indeed just passing by, and upon arriving, she decided to invite him to dinner. But since she responded that she had plans, she was just going to leave. Upon hearing the girl, Yu turns around and replies that he does have plans and they can't have dinner, but since she went through the trouble of coming, he'll take her home. Shin gets into the car and the two remain silent. For a while, suddenly Shin realizes that they're alone here and that it's the perfect moment to talk. She starts commenting on how the director has been very busy lately, but suddenly Yu has the car and says they have arrived. Still, Shin continues the conversation, pointing out that he found time to take her, despite his plans. The man replies coldly that he did it only because he had a bit of time left, before his friend finished working. Ju adds that it was also the direct route, so Shin shouldn't worry. He avoids looking at her constantly, but she suddenly suggests that they take her with them, relieved that Ju has finally turned toward her. Shin says she wants to help him since he asked her to pretend to be his girlfriend. She asks him to forget how he messed up the last time, and promises to do it right this time. Shin counts that she has seen many movies and read many books about this. However, Ju turns his gaze away again and states that he doesn't need it. Besides, he remembers how Shin told him before that she hated being in that situation, and Ju doesn't want to force anyone to do something they don't want. Shin nervously clutches her skirt and murmurs that this is too much already. The man turns toward her since he didn't hear her words well, and then Shin leans in to kiss him and Yu Wancha moves away from the girl and demands that she explain her actions. At one point, he starts to think she's drunk, but Shin reminds him how that night she promised to show him what a real bad boy looks like and kissed him. Now she wants to prove that. She can also be the villain, so she tries to do the same. She doesn't understand why he is allowed to act like this, and she's not, and adds that moreover, the night of that kiss, he was the one who was drunk, not her. She brushes a curly lock of hair back and says she wants to prove she can play the role of the villain well. The protagonist keeps saying something about how well prepared she is, but Ju no longer listens. He looks at her and reflects on that truth he just understood, not knowing why he proposes to try again. And taking her by the waist, he sits her on his lap to teach her how to do it correctly. Suddenly, he understands that he used to think the writer was a bit odd and feared seeming just like her in this recap manhwa. At least he thought so until this morning. But the reality is that he enjoys discovering this side of Miss Shin, a side that no one else has seen. And when he sees her with someone else for some reason, he feels a strong anger. The girl closes her eyes and approaches Young Won Cha. However, she notices that he's not coming closer and looks at him in surprise, grabbing Shin by the hair. The man pulls her toward him to join her in a kiss. He understands how much he has missed her. That feeling Gio experienced this morning upon seeing her with another was nothing but jealousy. The protagonist feels a slight dizziness from the scent of the director's perfume and from the comfortable position she is sitting on him. She doesn't understand why she feels so good now. As she pulls away from Gio, Shin asks if he liked it and if now she can go with him. The man lifts her up and responds that there's something he wants to check. With a smooth motion, he lays her back on the seat and ends up on top of her, looking into Shin's eyes. Gio asks her why she dressed up for her date with her friend. He told her he likes how she looks normally. The protagonist fears his gaze and says that only he knows that part of her. When Sonu sees her like this, he doesn't even realize it's her, and today, Shin dressed up because she was going to visit the publishing house. Gio suddenly brushes a lock of hair from her face and asks her to promise him not to show that part to anyone else but him. At that moment, his phone rings, and taking advantage of his distraction with the call, Shin pulls away from him, trying to understand the meaning of Gio's words, and whether he said it because she looks like a straw doll when she dresses up or because he's jealous. When the man finishes talking on the phone, Shin hurriedly says goodbye and thanks him for helping her grow. However, Ju stops her and asks her to act like his girlfriend. It turns out that a friend of Ju Wancha, whom he wanted to introduce to her last time, has also gotten attached to Jenna, and Ju discovers that he is the director of a publishing house and is interested in him. The boy repeats to her once more that he is late and that Ju already has a girlfriend. However, Jenna knows they are just pretending to be a couple, so she is confident she can charm the man. They didn't have to wait long, and soon Yu Wancha and Shinara arrive. The boy proposes that everyone drinks wine. Ju accepts and asks if Shin also wants to try a little with them. Seeing her expression, he understands that she has never drunk wine before. Ju offers her a plate of food and advises her to eat something if she's going to drink alcohol, thus showing concern, remembering she has to fulfill her role. Shin pokes a piece of steak from her plate and offers it to Ju to try. Those present freeze, momentarily surprised by what they see. Panic invades Shin, thinking she's doing something wrong, but Ju approaches the tongs and tastes the piece of meat she offers, saying it's delicious, and her cheeks flush. The couple in front watches in amazement as Shin and Ju behave so tenderly with each other. The more time passes staring at the man she thought was hateful, the more pleasant he seems to her. Although Yu has a girlfriend, Jenna thinks it will be easy to conquer him. As she perceives Shinara's clumsiness, the girl feels she has all the chances of beating her rival. Then she tells Shin that even though she took the time and effort to dress up, her bag doesn't match her dress. She laughs cheekily and adds that it looks like she ran out and took the first thing she found. Jenna looks at Shin, surprised, convinced that no matter how hard she tries, she won't be able to hide who she really is. However, to her surprise, the girl, as if nothing happened, starts talking about the capacity of her bag and how comfortable it is to carry her laptop to work. Upon finding out that Shin is a writer, Lena seizes the opportunity to make a biting comment, since writers generally don't do well in their personal lives. She adds that being a writer must be so complicated that she didn't even realize her lipstick had smeared. Shin covers her lips with her hand, while Ju Woncha's friend pushes Jenna and asks her what's wrong. The protagonist feels unbearable embarrassment thinking that her lipstick was smeared all this time while she was sitting here, but then Ju comes to her rescue. He leans over her and tenderly caresses her face, saying it's completely his fault, since her lipstick probably smeared because of what happened between them a moment ago. Ju wipes Shin's lips and comments that there's nothing to worry about since she remains beautiful. He then wipes his own lips, thinking that his lipstick is also there. The protagonist no longer knows if this is a game, and the silence that settles at the table is broken by Ju's friend, who says he needs to go to the bathroom. Taking advantage of his departure, Jenna becomes bolder and states that the fake girlfriend causes Ju many problems. She thinks it doesn't make sense to continue with this farce because they don't get along at all. Jenna mentions that she knows everything since they tried to set her up with him through a blind date. Today she came to confirm that they can start over, claiming that her girlfriend acts pitifully and she can do much better. Jenna touches Ju's leg under the table while grabbing his hand, offering to choose her and promising to play her role as girlfriend better. Jenna leans in closer to Ju and whispers that she could even marry him if necessary. But at that moment, Shin stands up and hugging him shouts that will never happen. She is sure that she won't marry someone she doesn't love, and besides, she's already married to her work. Before falling into his arms, she adds that besides, Yu is too good for someone like Jenna. Exiting the restaurant, Yu Woncha places Shin in the backseat of his car. She apologizes for not helping him with anything, but he replies that she did well today. He likes so much the enthusiasm with which Shin played his girlfriend in an awkward situation, as well as how she defended herself in an argument with Jenna. The protagonist feels her face heat up when she remembers how he fed her with his fork and called her by her name. Ju smiles and admits that at first he felt a bit nervous, but now he's happy that it was precisely Shin who played the role of his girlfriend. He asks her if she has time this weekend since he wants to gift her a new lip balm as a thank you for her help. The girl responds affirmatively and covers her face with her hands. Inside her, that strange feeling grows again upon hearing warm words from Ju, and her heart is about to burst. After a while, the director wakes the girl and tells her they are at the place. He suggests Shin go home quickly if she feels better already, so that her parents won't worry. Ju asks if she can walk home, but the protagonist seems not to hear him and only thinks that she doesn't want to leave. When the girl says it out loud, the man sits next to her. However, realizing the situation, Shin immediately tries to justify her words. She says she's still not sober and fears appearing like this in front of her parents, trying not to look him in the eye. The protagonist adds that she wants to rest a bit to recover. However, when Yu is about to get out of the car to let Shin stay, she grabs his hand once again, trying to justify her sudden impulse. She says it's cold outside, and besides, the car is too small to rest comfortably. Approaching Ju, the girl tells him he must also be tired, and that's why he should stay with her. Getting closer to Ju Woncha, Shin tells him it would be good for him to rest with her, and he understands how drunk she is by asking her if she's serious. The girl admits she doesn't want to be alone today. Ju tries to catch his breath as he carries her in his arms from the truck. He lays her on the bed while walking. His head begins to hurt, so he decides to go somewhere he can relax. Now remembering how he saw Shin at that moment, when she said she didn't want to be alone, he feels a new contempt toward himself. Ju is completely confused for misinterpreting her words about wanting to clear her mind. He leaves Shin in the room and plans to text her to wait in the car. Daeju leaves the hotel room and suddenly sees a man who can't enter the room with him. The guy knocks on the door, continuously clearly confused with the number. This situation makes him realize he can't leave Shin alone. The man feels responsible for her and decides to stay until she wakes up. However, Ju finds it unbearable to be in the same room with her for many reasons. He notices he's sweating while carrying her here and decides to take a cold shower to cool his head a bit. Shin hears the sound of water through her sleep and tries to understand where the cold shower calmed Ju Woncha significantly and returns to the room putting on a bathrobe. The man looks up at Shin and notices she's awake. The heroine sits on the bed in a strange posture and looks at him silently. Trying to understand what's going on, Ju offers the girl to sleep a little more if she wants. He explains that he says so, in case she doesn't remember saying that her head hurt and he brought her here. When Ju says he paid for the room for the whole night and Shin can rest as much as she wants, the girl suddenly grabs him by the bathrobe belt, pushes him onto the bed beside her, hugs him, and tells him she thought he had left. Only now does the man notice that Shin is saying all this in her sleep. He looks closely at the girl whom he can observe so closely for the first time. She has changed a lot since he saw her for the first time, but he thinks it suits her very well. Ju begins to find that he likes everything about her and never thought he could feel something similar. He pulls her closer and whispers that she shouldn't speak so carelessly about not wanting to be alone. Since many men could misinterpret her, Ju says he wants her to say that only to him. And at that moment, Shin opens her eyes. The man fears she heard his words, but the girl suddenly opens her robe and tells Ju that he is insensitive. She climbs on top of him, looks into his eyes, and asks why only he is allowed to do so. Realizing that Shin is still very drunk, Ju suggests she stop and just talk. However, the next instant, the girl gently kisses the man and bites his lip, complaining that he was the only one who cooled off and falls back onto him. In an unconscious state, checking that Shin is not listening at all, Ju pulls away from her. Feeling on top of her, the blood rushes to his head and he feels that it's becoming increasingly difficult to hold back. Ju takes a bottle of water from the counter drinks, and then tells Shin that she also needs to drink because thirst tortures her due to her drunkenness. He runs a wet finger over her lips and asserts that everything that happens from now on will be her fault. The first rays of sun try to filter through the well-drawn hotel curtains behind which the birds are already singing at full volume. Shin wakes up in an unfamiliar bed with a terrible headache. The girl looks around, trying to understand where she is. Memories begin to filter in gradually in a foggy state of consciousness. At the moment, Shin tries to understand why the bed underneath her is so wet. Nearby Ju-won, Cha looks at her smiling and asks if she has quenched her thirst since he gave her exactly what she wanted last night. To clear her thoughts, the protagonist decides to take a shower, but realizes the bathroom walls are transparent. Although she decides to leave the motel quickly, Yu-won-cha blocks her path and seriously asks where she's going in that state. And the man comments that they still need to talk about something. As there is still time before leaving, he proposes to have breakfast first, and Shin shyly agrees. The protagonist wants to know what topic he wants to discuss, and tries to remember what happened there the night before. Maybe she simply fell asleep there due to her headache. And Yu, in his robe, just because he had just taken a shower. The only thing that doesn't allow her to calm down is the fact that she's also, for some reason, without clothes. Yu-won-cha warns that Shin doesn't touch the food and the protagonist begins to have breakfast. While the girl chews her sandwich, her thoughts spin endlessly around the night before. But when Yu takes the water bottle, she suddenly starts to remember something. First, the man tried to give the water with his lips to the woman, who refused to drink. However, when the water ran out and Yu was about to go out to buy another bottle, Shin took it and, saying she needed something different, kissed him. These memories are so realistic that they couldn't have been part of a dream. Ju asks the girl what she's thinking so deeply about since she doesn't even hear what he's saying. Unable to withstand that pressure any longer, the protagonist stands up and asks what happened between them. The night before, the man, maintaining his usual calm, explains that all of Shin's clothes got wet when he tried to get her drunk. That's why he dried her off with a towel and dressed her in this kimono. Just that. But Shin doesn't need to worry since according to him it was dark and he didn't see absolutely anything. The girl sighs in relief upon learning that despite her drunkenness, she mainly changed herself. Shin thinks the rest was probably a dream due to her being depressed. This makes Ju-won-cha think that the girl has had similar dreams with his participation before, and he knows that dreams reflect a person's true unconscious personality. The protagonist asks them to believe her that she normally doesn't have those thoughts, although she tends to daydream a lot. At that moment, Ju begins to seem to him that Shin really remembers the events of the previous night, but he's not sure if it's a good thing or not. The girl keeps apologizing, but the director interrupts her and suggests they get ready. He looks sweaty from the previous night, so he wants to change before work. Approaching Shin, the man adds that she should hurry, since they still have many things to do today. An hour later, the protagonist finds herself in the fitting room of the store and hears advice on how she should style her hair. She changes clothes and moves the screen, so Jin Guanchala can see her. When asking the man if that outfit and hairstyle look good on her, Shin responds affirmatively. Jin is happy since they have a long walk ahead of them today. He gives his card to the sales assistant and pays for the purchases. After the boutique salon, the man proposes to buy a lipstick that matches her new look on the way. They also stop at the glasses stand and the cosmetics department. She can't decide. After the boutique, the guy suggests going to buy a lipstick that matches his new look on the way. They also stop at the glasses stand and the cosmetics department. She can't make up her mind. Between two lipstick shades, Jin notices and gently places his hand on her shoulder. Since her skin is fair, he suggests a bolder shade. But if she's not sure, he'll buy both lipsticks. Shin blushes, but in the end, she decides to stick with just one shade. As they pass by the bag stand, Shin thinks about how useful one like that would be. To carry her laptop, and Jin asks if she wants one. She replies yes, but says she'll come back later to buy it. The guy immediately pulls out his card to buy that bag and suggests looking at it as an investment in his work. However, Shin stops him, claiming he already has too many bags and proposes to finish the stroll and sit somewhere. The girl runs out of the store, saying she's heading to the cafe, and her behavior makes Jin smile. Shinara buys them 2 sweet drinks and desserts. She admits that in places like this, everything seems more delicious, since she usually takes food home for dinner. At a cafe near her apartment, Shin mentions that while waiting for the order, her parents called her. It turned out they hadn't even noticed she was missing from home. when they found out her mom accepted it without drama. But her dad got upset, even though he himself had advised her to go out more often. She comments that she understands her dad's feelings while wiping the smoothie remnants from her lips in this recap manhwa. He tells her that Shin acts recklessly, so she shouldn't go out alone. The man thinks the best thing is to go with her so her dad won't worry. Shin doesn't understand why he talks this way. If today she doesn't have to pretend to be his girlfriend. Day Won Cha wonders why they don't finish the smoothie already. They should have left by now, since it's getting close to the time of their lunch reservation. The protagonist gets up and asks him to let her pay for lunch since he's already bought her a lot of things. Shin knows he worries about her like a writer would, and it's part of his job. But if he keeps this up, she'll feel like she owes him something. Day One looks down and asks if he really thinks he would do all this for work. He's flattered that she has so much trust in his professional skills, but now it makes him sad. He takes her hand and asks her to answer a question. Ju Won-cha thinks that Miss Shin as a writer should know better than anyone what it could mean when, in novels, the protagonist generally indifferent to everything, and everyone suddenly starts doing unusual things for him. The girl feels her heart begin to race at hearing his words and her cheeks flush. Shinara tries to understand the meaning of the words just spoken. No matter how distracted she is, she can guess what's hidden behind such a question. Ju Won-cha looks into her eyes and patiently waits for an answer, struggling to find the right words and trying to pronounce it out loud. Shin replies that it normally means he's in love, but she doesn't finish speaking, as she suddenly stops upon hearing fragments of the girls' conversation at the next table. They talk about poorly chosen outfits and how little they suited each other. Shin remembers something similar happened the day they had seafood with the director at the restaurant. The protagonist then hears one of the girls wanted to get Ju's phone number, convinced that such a tall and attractive man couldn't be dating such a clumsy companion. So Shin dismisses the thought of love, convincing herself that they spend time together, only for work and nothing more. She responds that when a guy treats the protagonist well, it should mean she found his weak point. Ju is so surprised by her words that he wants to hear an explanation. Shin blushing replies that when a character in a novel acts differently, it means someone is blackmailing him. She immediately declares that she wants to return the gifts. If they have any hidden meaning, Yuan Cha feels a headache coming on and simply asks to forget this. In reality, Shin is just enjoying the time she spends with him and fears hearing that all of this is just part of the job. In the afternoon, right after lunch, sitting in the car, the protagonist has difficulty breathing from how much she ate. Ayu finds this trait of the girl amusing, as if she ate so much just to avoid wasting money. He smiles and suggests going out for dinner another time. Shin feels her heart race again and prepares to get out of the car, claiming it's time to go home. Jude has the girl and hands her a box of pastries he bought at that popular store. Shin is surprised by the man's assurance that she likes sweet things. Ju acknowledges that he simply noticed how she devoured desserts at the meeting with Sonu. For a moment, they look at each other in silence, and the man is about to take the box back, thinking he was mistaken. But Shin firmly holds onto the gift and promises to eat the macarons. While working, she thanks Ju for the constant gifts. At that moment, the phone rings and the girl grabs the device. Shin asks to wait a moment because she has to answer, and Ju turns around. When the man suddenly hears Ju's name, he feels anger starting to invade him. However, he patiently waits for Shin to finish the conversation. Ju hears how Suyu asks the girl what she had been doing all this time and how she responds that she went shopping. And at the moment when Shin says she's going home, the man suddenly puts his hand on her shoulder, ignoring that she hasn't hung up yet, pulling her closer and kissing her lips. While they look into each other's eyes, they hear Suyu's voice, who gets angry because she didn't call him, and while he gets mad. At Shin's silence, Yu kisses the girl again before hanging up. The protagonist tells Suyu that it's okay, and that he shouldn't worry about her. Upon returning home, Shin sits down to work, and during a break, she begins to explore tourist spots in Korea. She finds so many beautiful places that she can't tear herself away, and thinks about how well she would write among such landscapes. Among them, there are many options with accommodation, and Shin already imagines how she could embark on such a trip. The writer's imagination paints how she visits attractions, eats delicious food, and takes lots of photos. And the moment she imagines what could happen between her and Ju that night in the room, he suddenly calls. The man decided to call her later, thinking that Shin had rested today, even though he himself is finishing his training. At the gym, the protagonist fears admitting that she has been on the internet for a long time, choosing places they could go together. Then she says she woke up early and has been working all this time. Ju, for his part, says he went to the gym in the morning so as not to waste time since now he will be busier. Shin misinterprets his words again and asks him not to do it for her, but the man repeats that he does it because he wants to. Saying goodbye, the protagonist thinks about how disciplined this man is in everything. In fact, it seemed that way from the start, and that's why Shin was surprised when he said he had read her novel. The girl was sure that there couldn't be anything in common between them, but he really got attached to her. However, her insecurity overcomes her again, and Shin thinks again that everything will end when she finishes writing the novel. She convinces herself to stop filling her head with nonsense since the director does everything possible to help her. She decides to clean up before getting back to work and treat herself to a little self-care. Suddenly, Shin feels she wants to look her best. Those ideas are interrupted when her mother enters, who hasn't been able to contact her daughter for so long that she thought she wasn't home. The woman is surprised by Shin's unusual urge to clean the room before getting back to work. She isn't angry at all with her daughter for not having slept at home last night, but wants to know who exactly she was with. Upon learning that Shin was with someone from work, the woman confesses that at first she thought she had spent the night with Sonu. It turns out that the mother had been noticing for a while that her daughter was in love with her childhood friend, which is why the woman invited him over so often under the pretext of giving him food. She was sure that Shin was with him last night and called to make sure everything was okay. Meanwhile, Sun was walking alone and upon learning that the girl wasn't home, promised to contact her to clear everything up. When he dialed the number, Shin answered quite quickly. Sun began to ask her questions and got angry because she had gone shopping without inviting him. At one point, Shin stopped responding for some reason, and the boy got worried, not understanding what was happening. He raised his head and suddenly noticed a car parked under the light of a street lamp where a couple was kissing. Sun felt uncomfortable seeing that scene and hid behind the corner of the building. When he accidentally hung up the call with Shin, he peeked from the corner to see who was getting out of the car. Upon looking closer, he recognized the same girl from the cafe who had recently gifted Sun a tie. It surprised him that she also lived nearby. He tried to see the man who was still sitting in the car. He thought he had seen that car somewhere before, and the situation felt somehow very familiar. Shin said goodbye to Ju-won-cha and watched him drive away in the car. At that moment, Sun's call rang again, who immediately apologized for hanging up accidentally before. He actually called back because he needed to check something. Then, in high school, Sun saw his childhood friend in his class for the first time in several years. She was sitting sadly at her desk, since other boys pushed her and she fell when Sonu stepped in. They said it was accidental because they were teasing her and touched her by accident. The boy defended Shin and yelled at his classmates. The girl was sitting with tears in her eyes, checking if her glasses were broken. Meanwhile, Sonu threatened the boys with revenge. If they hurt her again, Shin cleaned her glasses and put them back on, convincing her classmate that everything was fine and that nothing serious had happened. At that moment, Sonu seemed to show concern for the girl, as he felt responsible for his childhood friend. He met Nunu when he entered one of the bars to celebrate the end of his military service. Under the influence of alcohol, he complained about his boss, but Sonu thought he was in love with him. However, this woman, who was 4 years older, showed interest in the boy and suddenly, without warning, proposed to start dating. The proposal surprised him as it didn't fit in his mind how he could date someone he didn't know at all. However, to Nunu, this didn't matter at all. In her opinion, they should get to know each other better during the relationship. Yoon thought this woman had quite a bit of knowledge about relationships. Besides, she had just finished her military service, so without thinking too much, he accepted. The next day, as she had asked him, he found her at night after leaving work near the office. The young woman's co-workers looked at him enviously, admiring her young suitor. Sun felt embarrassed and bewildered by so much attention. Then a little further, he noticed a man watching them intently, with a serious expression. Seon didn't understand why that man was staring at them. He was listening carefully to their conversation. However, the relationship between Seon and Nunu ended without even having time to develop, as the next day she asked him to stop texting her and blocked his number. Jun didn't even imagine that they would break up like that and didn't understand why she did it. He would like to know the reason. But when the next day he approached Nunu's office, he saw her with a man, the same man who had been staring at him so intensely that day. Seon understood that Nunu had used him to provoke jealousy in her boss and get his attention. Then everything clicked in his mind. He decided to distract himself and look for a cafe with desserts nearby. It was then that Sunu met her for the first time, and for some reason he felt a strange closeness to her. Although fate had brought them together several times, he hadn't managed to get her phone number. Sun didn't know that she already had a boyfriend and didn't want to go through that again. But today, for some reason, it occurred to him that he had done something wrong too, and so while staying behind the corner, he called Shinara back. He needed to check something urgently, and after doing so, he said goodbye and hung up the phone. Gripping the phone tightly in his hand, Sun tried to sort out his own thoughts. Shinara's mother looks on in surprise at how her daughter has tidied up, especially since she explains that she's going out to dinner. But she wants to arrive early, so she hurries. The mother noticed that lately, her daughter goes out a lot and dresses nicely. She teasingly asks if Shin is going on a date with Sun. But the girl replies that she has a meeting with the CEO of the publishing house. The woman is disappointed that it's a work meeting and asks her daughter not to stay out too late today. The protagonist decided to show the director a completely new side of herself, and for that, she booked a table at a fancy restaurant. Ju-won-cha was already on the street when he received a message from Shin with the address, where she added that she couldn't wait for dinner tonight. He replies that he's heading there already, and smiles. Without realizing it, upon seeing his reflection in the display, he immediately adjusts his facial expression. Then Ju realizes that with the work suit, he'll look too formal at the restaurant and decides to change. He writes to Shin that he will briefly return to the office first, and then will come right away. It was the same last time, and if he keeps showing up at their meetings, in work suits she will think they only see each other for work matters. He wants to make an effort to see her, in a way that makes her feel comfortable by his side. However, when the man lost in these thoughts hurries to change, someone suddenly calls him. Upon raising his gaze, he sees Sun in front of him, who says he had an interview near his publishing house. He admits he really hoped to see the man, because he wants to talk about something that can't be said over the phone. Sun remembers that they have seen each other a couple of times, alongside Shin, and now he wants to talk about it. The gazes of the girls in the cafe shift towards two handsome young men who sat at one of the free tables. Sun, feeling too hot in that work suit, loosens his tie. He doesn't understand how the man in front of him can dress like that constantly and also drink hot black coffee. Yu asks him to hurry and get straight to the point of the conversation. Sun leans back in his chair and looks closely at the man slowly sipping his cold Americano through a straw. Then he apologizes and says he was very nervous about today's interview. Ju interrupts him and asks him to get straight to the point since he is running late for a meeting. Sunny asks if he is going to meet with Shinara. After a brief silence, the man replies that he shouldn't have to answer to a guy he's having a meeting with. Boldly looking Ju in the eyes, Sunny tells him he heard from Shin's mother that she has been going out a lot lately. He finds it strange that the director spends so much time with a girl in this recap manhwa and wants to make sure he has no bad intentions. Crossing his arms, Ju asserts that Mrs. Shin writes based on real experiences and people. That's why she helps him with that. However, Sunny finds this a bit absurd. He is happy if everything is really like that, but he is worried that Shin might have done something strange due to her own naivety. Sunny tells him that the girl was missing from home all night a few days ago, which is why her parents called him when they were looking for her. Upon hearing this, Yu swallowed hard though without showing it, commented that they must be very close if his family calls him. Sunny explains that their parents are good friends, which is why he asks him to understand his concern for the girl. The time they met at the bookstore and you scolded him? The boy suddenly thought about why he had never read the book written by his childhood friend, because that day he bought it and only recently finished reading it. Sony was particularly struck by the protagonist's infatuation with her childhood friend, and many memories came to mind after attentively listening to the boy. Ju Won-cha asks him exactly what he means. According to Sunu, the events in the book are too similar to be just a coincidence, and since Ju himself said that Shin writes based on her experience, it means she used it as a reference. Upon leaving the cup on the table, the man states that he sees nothing wrong with that, even if it were true. Because no matter which past experience Shin used as inspiration or what feelings she wrote before now, she is focused on him. Looking at Sunu, he adds that he seems obsessed with the past more than he thought. Upon leaving home, Shin reads a message from Ju and is very surprised. She doesn't understand why he first wrote that he was already heading to the restaurant and then suddenly decided to stop by the office, deciding not to give in to bad thoughts. Shin sits down and takes off her shoes to let her feet rest from the high heels. Since there is still time for the reservation, the girl decides to have a coffee for the moment. Upon looking at the clock, Ju Won-cha asks if Sunu has finished what he wanted to tell her. He states he doesn't want to be late, so it's time to go, and he gets up from the table. In the end, Ju says he understands the boy's concern for Shin, but he believes he shouldn't interfere in others' matters, since those boys who ignored her for so long and now pretend to care for her aren't even popular in novels. When Young Won-cha leaves the cafe, he suddenly runs into Shin at the door. Noticing her surprise, he tells her something happened and asks her to hurry to the restaurant. However, he fails to get Shin out in time as Sunny appears behind him, ironically pointing out that now he understands exactly with whom. The director had a meeting. The protagonist doesn't understand what Sunny is doing here, and remembers that today she isn't wearing a wig, nor is she heavily made up, realizing that he recognized her. The boy leans towards Shin and tells her that he wants to thank her for the handkerchief she gave him that day. Dae-yu stays silent, but feels the anger beginning to invade him. Meanwhile, Sunny keeps insisting with the girl, claiming that the handkerchief helped him in an interview. Unable to stand this scene any longer, Yu takes Shin's hand and asks her to calm down, hiding the protagonist behind him. He advises Sunny to be careful when talking to someone's girlfriend since it's inappropriate. Shin blushes upon hearing how Yu calls her his girlfriend. She remembers they agreed to pretend to be a couple, but her heart beats with joy upon hearing him call her that. After telling the boy everything, Yu Won-cha turns around and calls to Shin, but suddenly Sunny grabs the girl's arm and asks her to wait. Shin pulls her hand away and reminds him that her boyfriend doesn't like this, so if they meet again somewhere, she asks him to act as if they don't know each other. The protagonist leaves, leaving Sunny standing in the middle of the street, completely perplexed. However, the shock quickly dissipates and he smiles as he now intends to make the girl see him. Often at his place, Shin asks Young Won-cha to stop. It's very hard for her to keep up with him in those heels. Only now does the man realize how the young woman has dressed for her date. He tells her that her dress is quite pretty. The protagonist feels very embarrassed that he suddenly says such things. Ju remembers that the day she accidentally entered his office, she was wearing a similar dress. He recalls that day the young lady met her childhood friend but never said why, and when Yu hears that she even gave him a tie, he is surprised and wants to know if it was all really coincidence. Shin confesses that she didn't actually plan to meet with Sanao, but it wasn't a coincidence that she ended up in that neighborhood. The protagonist is determined to tell Ju that she went to his office on purpose to see him, but she starts the story from when she spilled coffee on Sanao and gave him a tie she just happened to find in her bag. Suddenly, the man asks if that is the tie she bought at the mall, because if she kept it in her bag until she couldn't give it to him in person, it could only mean one thing. Ju thinks she still has feelings for her friend. Upon hearing this, Shin tries to unravel the feelings, overwhelming her at that moment. She gets a call from the restaurant to confirm the reservation. Shin listens to how they tell her they are on their way and asks the girl to hurry so they won't be late. Shin is surprised that the director asked her that. The girl tries to understand what she was thinking about answering him when the restaurant's phone interrupted them. The most important thing is why Ju had that expression when he asked her that question. A while later, they are already seated at the restaurant, and the girl enjoys both the food and the pleasant ambiance. She's unsettled by the fact that since they arrived here, Ju hasn't said a single word. Since she brought him here to have a good time, Shin decides to cheer him up. She tells him something about how the food gets soaked in sauce in places like this. However, Ju shows no special interest, and Shin feels uncomfortable because of that. She can't even tear a piece of bread and gets frustrated at not being able to do something so simple. Seeing Ju Woncha's frowning face, she feels that he no longer wants to spend time with her. Meanwhile, he is getting angry because he can't even eat properly, as Shin's words keep swirling in his head. The words of that idiot about how it's strange for a director to spend time with a writer get stuck in his throat. A waiter approaches their table and kindly offers him to at least try a glass of wine. When the waiter offers wine to the man sitting across from him, he flinches at his threatening gaze. Shin feels even more uncomfortable with the silence at the table and decides to take the initiative. The young woman suddenly asks him if he likes how she dresses. The last time she dressed like this, he made the same face and warned her not to do it again. So now she decides that none of that suits her. Ju explains that he was trying to say that normally she also looks attractive and doesn't need to waste time on unnecessary things. Then Shin confesses that she tries to look good to match him when they spend time together. When they went together to a seafood restaurant, everyone looked at her with disdain. Ju covers her hand with his and suddenly apologizes because he thinks there was a misunderstanding. He says that this dress looks so good on her that he isn't even sure he can find the right compliment. Moreover, when he said she didn't need to dress up, he meant that she didn't have to change to match him. Actually, she can drive people crazy in an instant. Ju confesses that's why. He is worried she might attract unwanted attention being with a man as old as him. Shin is shocked by what he is saying. This man quickly assures her that nothing is like that, and that people only look at him because he is very attractive. While they argue, a boy at the next table proposes to his girlfriend. Shin is so impressed that she can't take her eyes off the couple. Ju smiles and asks if Miss Era would like something like that. The girl asks if he is referring to marriage proposals and suddenly states that none of that interests her, though she enjoys watching it. The girl smiles, convinced they finally have something in common since the director also isn't interested in getting married. She laughs, saying that for some reason it seems to her that they are starting to get along better, though Shin thinks her answer will soften Ju. The man holds his head, imagining the path that still awaits him after dinner. Ju Won-cha declines dessert, but leans in to try it with the girl's fork. Upon leaving the restaurant, the man suggests calling a taxi, but Shin refuses and they decide to walk together to the bus stop. The girl finds it so comfortable to be next to Ju that she feels she doesn't want to part. Shin wonders if she should invite him for coffee to buy a little more time. So lost in thought, she doesn't even see the column in front of her, but Ju grabs her in time and saves her from hitting it. However, as they go around the column, he doesn't let go of her hand, as if they had been walking like this the whole time. Shin likes his touches, but insecurity takes over her again, thinking Ju is holding her so she won't fall. She looks at him and thinks about how kind he has been to her lately. Ju not only is attentive to her, but acts as if they have a more serious relationship. For a moment, Shin allows the thought that he does this with other people, but she quickly dismisses it. The protagonist decides to think less about it and be happy to spend time with him absorbed in these thoughts. Shin doesn't even realize how quickly they reach the stop. Still feeling reluctant to say goodbye, she takes off her jacket from her shoulders and hands it to Ju. Ju looks at the girl and says it's the right moment to tell her something. Shin feels that he doesn't want this night to end either. She asks if that means anything, but he interrupts her and responds affirmatively. The man suggests going together to the suburbs, but Shin, not hearing his words clearly, and thinking he invites her for coffee, says she isn't opposed to that, though she wouldn't mind going to Ju's house. Ju stands still, and the girl, realizing she said something inappropriate, asks him to forget her words. Shin explains that it hurt to end the night like this, and thought it would be nice to go for coffee or to the park. The protagonist hides her face in her jacket, fearing that now he might find her even weirder. However, Ju suddenly declares that it makes him happy. since he also doesn't want this night to end. He covers her shoulders with his jacket and tells her how happy he is that they feel the same. He would like to take Shin straight to her house, but he doesn't think he can go to work tomorrow. So instead, Ju proposes spending a night together somewhere this weekend. The next day, the protagonist meets the director at one of the cafes where they serve soups, since he usually comes here for lunch. The girl is not only happy to eat soup she likes, but also for the opportunity to learn something new about Ju. Since Shin knows how busy he is, she decides to do the research herself to choose a destination for the weekend. The girl has chosen several options and now shows them to Ju. Among them, there are 2-day, 1-night travel options where they can have a good time and see many things. The man listens attentively to Shin's proposals, although they deviate quite far from what he expected in his imagination. He suggests that the girl choose for herself and just inform him of the cost. Shin proposes splitting the bill, but Ju insists he wants to do it this way to impress her. He admits he is worried about that first night they spent together. Although the motel was chosen under unavoidable circumstances, he wants to find a way to make it up to her. If Shin is still worried about him paying, he asks her to consider it part of the research for her novel. Seeing Ju, the protagonist understands that this incident really worries him, even though it shouldn't. She promises not to think too much about it and focus only on her work. Shin suddenly feels she is really starting to understand him and that it doesn't matter how he behaves with others. Ju is very kind to her. She remembers that he never answered her question that night, but barely. The girl is going to speak when a waitress arrives with bowls of soup. Upon saying goodbye, Ju mentions he will be very busy, with interviews in the coming days, and Shin promises to let him know as soon as she chooses a place while watching him walk away. The girl regrets not being able to answer that question, but they will spend the whole weekend together, so she is sure she can talk to him and tell him how she truly feels. The protagonist is happy that going out of the house was a good idea. She went out because she couldn't concentrate on work. As soon as she sat in front of the laptop, Sunu arrived at her house. He has been entering her home so frequently lately that she can no longer work at home. Shin walks down the street, thinking about what to do as she doesn't want to return home at all. The girl decides to enter a bookstore. While examining the books, she thinks about going to a quiet cafe and working there, when suddenly a girl who is also looking at books on that shelf greets Shin. The protagonist at first doesn't recognize Nam Soo-yoon, which infuriates the girl. Shin tries to justify herself, pointing out that Soo-yoon has changed a lot since their last meeting. The girl explains that she has started reading a lot lately since she has an interview at a publishing house soon. The protagonist smiles and says that Soo-yoon obviously read her book. The girl doesn't want to admit it, so she replies that she just glanced at the plot. Shin looks at her and suddenly feels something strange. When the three of them were together, this girl, for some reason, didn't please the protagonist. But now she looks at her with different eyes and even seems funny. Suddenly, Soo-yoon says she decided not to waste any more time with Soo and focus on her career. Feeling good after saying it out loud, Nam says goodbye and leaves the store. But suddenly she stops, turns around and says she supports Shin because of all the girls she knew from Sinyu. She only dated those two. Shin leaves the store lost in her thoughts. Hearing all that from Jong was pleasant, but it complicates her feelings. Her thoughts are interrupted when the phone in her bag rings. Suddenly, Shin's mother asks her daughter to go to Sun's house and pick up her dishes. The girl has never been to his house. But suddenly he stops, turns around and says he supports Shin since out of all the girls he met, he only dated those two. Shin leaves the store lost in her thoughts. Hearing all that from Jong was nice, but it complicates her feelings. Her thoughts are interrupted when the phone in her bag rings. Suddenly, Shin's mom asks her to go to Sun's house and pick up her dishes. The girl had never been to his house, since the guy started living alone. She hesitates by the door but suddenly hears his voice from the apartment, announcing that the door is open. She pushes the door, and from the threshold announces that she's there to get the food containers. Sun comes out of the bathroom drying his head with a towel, and apologizes for always forgetting to return them. Shin is surprised to see his bare torso, since it's the first time she's seen a male body so up close. However, when she looks at him, she realizes she wants to see Director Yu's body. When Sun asks if she was surprised, she replies that she was surprised that he took showers with the door open. The guy explains that he didn't close the door because he was waiting for her to arrive and asks her to wait. While washing the dishes while she waits for Sun, she takes a look around his apartment. The guy invites her to sit down and have coffee with him. Sitting on the floor, they talk about how comfortable it is to live alone and not depend on parents. Shin admits that seeing his apartment made her consider moving. When Sun talks about the advantages of living alone, she envies him a little. The guy offers to help her find housing, and Shin promises she will consider it. She prepares to leave, but Esnu tells her he forgot to mention the main advantage of living alone. The girl prepares with interest to listen. Esnu moves closer to Shin and tells her he just understood. The guy's hand slowly moves down her back and ends up very close to her. Esnu tells her that when living alone, one doesn't have to worry about others and can be alone with whoever they want. He caresses the protagonist's face, who tries to understand the meaning of his words. However, everything Snu tells her she imagines not with him. but with you in this recap manhwa. At one moment, the guy realizes that Shin, submerged in her dreams, isn't listening to him at all. He tries to get her attention, but at that moment, the girl receives a call from Ju and answers. Shin tells the director she can't talk much right now, but Snoo hears how she promises she will define the place and get in touch with him. When she hangs up, the girl asks the guy about the person he likes, but SNU doesn't continue his thought and only asks if Shin plans to travel. Although the protagonist says it's a work trip, the guy's question about whether she will travel with the director of the publishing house makes her blush. Shin tries to convince SNU that he misunderstood everything, but his attention is not lost on how much she blushed. The girl starts to justify herself and explains that Ju's presence inspires her, but she understands that now romance is more an excuse to spend time with him. She gets angry and remembers how he offered her company when she needed it. The girl thought that without her, he had enough friends to hang out with, feigning modesty. The guy says he's actually not popular. However, Shin knows perfectly well that it's a lie. Despite that, Sinu keeps insisting that many people form a bad impression of him because of his appearance. But he doesn't actually have many close friends. Shin reminds Sinu of the girls around him, but he says they all already have boyfriends, sadly, shaking his head. He asserts that he obviously reached his limit in high school. Shin remembers Suin's words, that she told him at the bookstore and now understands they were true. She tries to console Sinu, who laments that with him, everything is over and that it will be harder in the future. The protagonist didn't even understand how suddenly she became his comforter. She tries to instill confidence in Sinu by recounting how she manages very well without friends. Then the guy suddenly asks if she wants to go with him, since lonely people should support each other. Otherwise, he's already selecting a cafe where they can go together on weekends. But Shin asks him to stop. She explains that she already has plans for the weekend. Shin admits that it's related to Director Cha and can't cancel the trip. The guy asks if it's related to her work, and after a brief silence, the girl answers affirmatively. Suddenly, the guy suggests using him as a prototype for her new novel. Like last time, he acknowledges he read Shin's first novel recently, and memories of his childhood keep flooding his mind. Shin is scared and thinks that Sun might be upset that she wrote about him without his consent. But the guy acknowledges that after reading the book, he finally understood why he always asked her to read it. Shin realizes that the feelings Sun feels now have nothing to do with anger. He holds her hands and asks why she didn't tell him before, because if Shin had told him, he wouldn't have to spend time with someone. Like Director Cha. When returning home, the protagonist can't write anything. The girl feels she's at a standstill. Although she wants to relax over the weekend, she has to finish everything in 2 days. The only thing that relieves her is that her mom saved her from the awkward situation with Sun. She called just as he grabbed Shin's hands, and the girl took the opportunity to go home. The protagonist had wished so much for Sun to read her novel, but when he finally did for some reason, she wasn't happy at all. Instead of feeling happy, she felt relieved. Shin understood that the person she wants to write and think about now is Ju Won-cha. The protagonist even jumps for joy when she realizes that she has finally clarified her feelings. This time she won't use a novel since she wants to tell him everything personally. But for that, she must meet with him on weekends while completing all the deadlines beforehand. Director Cha took a short break for coffee to call Shin. His voice sounds hoarse to her, and she explains that she didn't sleep at all last night. Shin tells him that she decided to finish all the deadlines before her trip, or suggests postponing the trip if it's too difficult for the writer, but she doesn't want to hear about it as she's determined to finish everything and meet with him on weekends no matter what. The director confirms if she can handle it and asks her to contact him if she needs to discuss anything. Shin doesn't want to disappoint him with an unfulfilled promise, and that's why she confesses that she's just looking forward to her trip. This reassures Ju and offers the girl that he will take care of the hotel reservation if she's busy. Only now, Shin realizes that she completely forgot to make the reservation and looks at the date on the calendar. The man hears how the girl falls from the chair at the other end of the line. After convincing him that she's okay, Shin says goodbye and hangs up. When she hangs up the receiver, Yu stays for a while on the balcony looking at his phone. Throughout these days, the heroine was so busy that the dates got mixed up and she didn't realize it was already Friday. She decides to hurriedly book one of the few available spots, but when she tries, she horrifiedly discovers that there are no spots left. Shin panics, not knowing what to do now. Work at the publishing house progresses normally, and editor Kim introduces the new employee with her responsibilities. Nam Soo-yoon is so tired that she is very happy about the upcoming days off. She had to work overtime, and upon leaving the office, she is surprised to see that she's not alone. When approaching, Soo-yoon shudders at recognizing Director Cha from that meeting at the cinema. His authoritative expression terrifies the girl. They have an awkward conversation about whether Soo-yoon is adjusting well in her new position. You couldn't imagine they would see each other again, much less work together. He knows this girl studied at the high school with Shin. After an awkward pause, Soo-yoon asks the director if she can go home. He lets her go and smilingly asks the girl not to feel shy and to come to him if she has work problems, trying to leave a good impression on Shin's friends. He emphasizes that Nam can approach him since their age difference isn't that big. The girl doesn't fully understand what just happened and says goodbye to the director. Leaning back in the chair, the man thinks if he did well, or if his desire to look good in front of Shin's acquaintances only feeds his ego, he feels he needs to work on his facial expression, which scares many people. The next day, Shin is at the entrance with a suitcase, waiting for the director's arrival. She didn't sleep at all the previous night, but she managed to meet the deadlines and book accommodation. Now the girl is sure that people can achieve anything if they really want it. The protagonist hears. The car horn turns around and freezes. Director Cha, dressed in sports clothes, approaches her, apologizing for being late, and offers to help her load her things into the car. Noticing how Shin looks at him, he explains that he dressed comfortably for the long trip, but the girl convinces him that she likes it a lot. The protagonist is surprised by how incredible he looks even in that outfit. While the man waits, trying not to appear indifferent since he dressed so that she would feel comfortable after loading the belongings into the car, they finally set off. Shin admires the natural landscapes passing by the window. Upon arriving at the place, the girl looks in amazement at the blue surface of the sea. As it's the weekend, there are a lot of people everywhere. Shin notices that there are many couples among the vacationers. According to Yu, it's a very popular place for dates. He smiles and adds that they might think they're a couple too. Upon hearing this, the protagonist blushes, so much that the man thinks he was too direct. He decides to take a breath and, like everyone else, starts taking photos. Later, together with Ju, they visit tourist attractions and enter a cafe to have a snack. The protagonist starts to feel that the director feels the same as she does. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dedicated his valuable weekend to her company. Upon seeing an ice cream shop, Yu comments that he doesn't mind sweets, and Shin immediately asks for some for herself, hopefully all the time. The man thinks she's excited. He was worried that Shin would feel pressured by letting her organize the trip, but now he sees it's not like that. At the moment, Yu considers looking for a place with a good atmosphere to have dinner and be able to talk. A girl running bumps into him. The girl begins to cry and her mother rushes to her side, demanding that she apologize to the man. The girl apologizes, saying that the person was in the middle of the street. But when she looks up at him, the little boy gets scared. Shin, after buying 2 huge ice creams, heads towards Yu, however. She suddenly notices a strange agitation and the screams of a child refusing to apologize to a man who has an angry face. Ju understands that his expression might have scared the girl and kneels in front of her. He sweetly apologizes to the girl and assures her that his face always looks like this and that he's really not angry with her. Ju pats her head, and once convinced that he's not as angry as he seemed, the girl also apologizes to him. Observing this scene, Shin suddenly understands that the director is capable of smiling like that to others too. This leads her to think that the kindness he showed her wasn't something special. Maybe she had given too much importance to something that didn't deserve it. All the motivation and energy that had flooded her until then suddenly disappear. Ju Won-cha notices that Shin has suddenly become strangely quiet. Sitting on the bench, he asks the young woman if she's tired, but she replies that she's just surprised after her motivation vanished. Shin feels how the insomnia of the past few days begins to affect her. Ju suggests to the young woman that she go to the room since he's also tired, and she takes out her phone to check the reservation. Suddenly, the protagonist informs the man that her reservation was canceled and doesn't understand how that's possible. Shin admits that she actually forgot to book a room because she was too busy. Later, she managed to get a room that was canceled at the last moment, but it seems it was just an error on their website. The protagonist says she's very embarrassed and really didn't want to disappoint him. The girl goes silent and then suggests staying at a nearby motel. After thinking for a moment, Ju promises to sort it out. He gets up from the bench and suggests having dinner first. The man apologizes because he needs to make a call and walks away a bit. The call lasted only a few seconds, and Ju tells Shin that he has already arranged everything. There's a hotel nearby where he stays every time he comes for work, and the manager gladly accepted to host them. Running his fingers over the girl's face, Yu tells her that the conditions of this hotel are better than elsewhere, and that they will be able to rest well. But the girl should know that they will only be given one room since they check in on the day of the reservation, so they will probably have to sleep in the same bed if Shin doesn't mind. Yu suggests going there right now. Upon arriving at the hotel, the protagonist looks in amazement at its luxurious interior and the well-dressed guests. She tries to convince herself that everything is fine. After all, she also booked a room for them. At first, although there were separate beds, they had already spent the night together in a motel, so there was no reason for discomfort. Upon opening the door to the room, the girl eagerly examines the spacious area. She had never seen a room like this, and now she can't hide her amazement. Shin runs towards the room and is surprised to see the size of the huge bed. Then she takes a look at the bathroom, which also impresses her. For Joe, it's not the best room he's seen, but considering how they managed to get it, it's quite good. Shin sticks her head out onto the balcony and discovers a private pool there while the girl tries to absorb the situation, wondering if Ju has seen better rooms with a pool. He orders room service a few minutes later and they are already eating with appetite. The delicious food prepared at the hotel restaurant. Shin worries that all this might have cost Ju too much, but he asks her not to worry since he has a membership at this hotel. However, the girl wants to pay at least part of this trip before she finishes speaking. Ju grabs Shin's arm with appetite, eats a piece of chicken from the girl's fork, and the man tells her to stop thinking about all that and focus on resting and relaxing. Feeling that things are getting better, Shin accepts his proposal and gets up to take a shower, promising to be back soon. Seeing that there's a sofa besides the bed, he offers the young woman the bedroom and will settle himself on the sofa. Shin feels embarrassed for having caused problems with the hotel, and now Yu is even giving her the bed. Just before the man stepped out of the shower, the girl came up with an idea to do something nice for him. Joe deliberately took a cold shower because he had decided that night he should be well. However, upon returning to the room, he found an unusual scene. Shin is sitting on the floor in shorts with her skirt rolled up and hair tied back. When asked by Yu what she's doing, she replies that she dressed like this for comfort. The protagonist decided to give him a massage and now proposes to move to the bed. Yu tries to resist, but she pushes him toward the bedroom. Convinced he needs to rest, Shin knows a lot about pressure point massages, although it will be her first time applying it on someone else. Today, even though the man had just calmed down with a cold shower, he finds it hard to deny a favor to such an enthusiastic girl. The protagonist begins the massage, and Yu feels that she really knows how to do it well. When Shin climbs over the man to reach the other side, he barely manages to control himself. The girl tries to stay focused and direct her energy to her fingers, but she finds it very hard to concentrate with that look. Anyway, while massaging him, she also relieves her own fatigue. Suddenly, Ju tells the girl that now it's her turn. He turns quickly toward her and reminds her that they came to the hotel because she said she was tired. The protagonist is overcome with panic at the thought that he will touch her body and will be disappointed. Ju approaches the girl and asks why she can touch him and he can't. He gently takes her leg and caresses it softly. Shin confesses that she thinks she saw new facets of the director today. Ju responds that people can't always be the same, or maybe they simply don't know each other as well as they think. The girl gets angry with him, convinced that he has no right to say such a thing. She's surprised that just recently he laughed with people he didn't even know. It happened because until then it seemed to her that he was especially kind to her. Shin understands that she sounds like she's jealous, but she keeps saying that maybe this whole time she misunderstood him. She apologizes for saying silly things and wishes him goodnight, willing to sleep on the sofa. But Jude stops the girl by grabbing her wrist with a gentle motion, pulling her toward him. A moment later, Shin ends up on the guy's knees. She tries to break free, but June doesn't plan to let her go until she answers what she didn't understand well. Completely blushing, Shin starts to stammer that his actions disorient her. The man looks at her intently, trying to catch her gaze. Finally catching it, he asserts that she still hasn't understood. Pressing the girl's palm against his face, Ju says he acts like this only with those who are special to him. And doesn't it seem curious to her that until now, he hasn't shown Shin even half? The girl doesn't fully understand whom he's exactly referring to when he mentions those who are special to him. But her hand moves toward him. Looking into his eyes, she leans closer to his lips and whispers that she's very intrigued by him. The protagonist feels how deeply unsettled she is, even with a fleeting thought that he might be referring to someone else. Now hoping that Ju acts like this only because of her, Shin melts into him in a sweet kiss. Suddenly she struggles to breathe, and when she pulls away slightly and opens her eyes, she admires his expression. At that moment, Shin feels her happiness and kisses the man again. But when she feels his lips starting to go down her neck, she suddenly pushes him away. Now, she realizes she hasn't showered yet and rushes to the bathtub. The protagonist quickly exits the bedroom and slams the door. She needs time to calm her heart, so Shin decides to fill the bathtub and relax a bit. Remembering the events of the last few minutes, she wonders if Yu kissed her because he considers her special. She went a bit too far, but she got scared and made up an excuse to escape. The writer's imagination paints scenes of him entering her bathroom to scrub her back. The girl feels panic again. However, Shin quickly recovers and promises not to run away this time. The girl fixes her gaze on the door, thinking Yu will enter now, but he doesn't appear. Not expecting him in the bathtub, Shin wraps her head in a towel, puts on the kimono, and returns to the room. She notices that she hasn't been gone long. She sits on the bed with the hairdryer, in her hand ready to help her dry her hair. Shin looks at him, scared, eyes gray, with the stern look she already knows. Ju hits his knee and the girl obediently approaches him. The man sits Shin on his knees and takes a towel from her hair, then begins to dry her hair, carefully caressing it with his fingers. The girl feels the touch of his large, warm hands on her neck. The man seems so careful and attentive that she enjoys each of his touches. Suddenly, Yu asks if all Shin's energy disappeared today just because she envied a kid under 10 years old. The blushing protagonist confesses that it's more than envy, because at that moment he seemed like a stranger to her. She likes that he's so kind and warm, and enjoys discovering other facets of him, but when she realized that she still didn't know him completely suddenly, she became distant. Shin assures that it's not because of that she envied him, and Yu hugs her tightly smiling. He gives her a soft kiss on the neck, surprising the girl with the unexpected kiss. Ju explains that he did it to help her relax. By hugging her tightly, he does what he has wanted for a long time and buries his face in her neck. The man lays her down and squeezes her against the bed, surprised that she didn't know it as it seemed obvious to him. However, now Ju feels that Shin misinterpreted him. He promises to do everything possible so that she doesn't feel shy or think about another person this time and understands everything correctly. The sun wakes Yu, and he sits on the bed surprised that morning has come so soon. However, he managed to sleep well, and now recalls the events of the previous night when he tried to get closer to Shin. She pushed him away with her foot and started shouting that she wasn't sure she could do it. The girl attacked him with her little angry foot. The man grabbed her foot and Shin shuddered with tears in her eyes. She admitted it was her first time, that's why she was so scared. Placing his hand on her shoulder, Ju asked if she really wanted to know about him, the way he acts with people who are important to him, how he looks when he's with them. The girl listened attentively, and a tear stood still on her cheek. She sat up and nodded slightly in response to his question. The man gently placed his palm on her hand and told her that she was now the closest and most important person to him in this recap manhwa. Then he leaned closer to the girl and kissed her on the lips tenderly, promising her that now she would see him with her own eyes. That's how she became his first partner, as it had been a long time, since he lived something like this and he could no longer control himself. Looking toward the side of the bed where Shin was, he noticed that she had covered herself with a blanket up to her head. Ju thinks the girl must be very tired, since she's still asleep. He reaches out to lower the blanket from her head, but upon removing it, he realizes that Shin isn't underneath. Not finding her in the bathroom, the man wonders where she could have gone. He sits on the bed trying to understand what could have happened and what he did wrong. Ju fears that Shin hates him for what happened. Last night it seemed they found a common language and now understood each other, but now he doesn't understand at all what is happening. The moment the man decides he should call Shin first, he hears a noise in the adjacent room. Turning around, he sees the girl sitting on the sofa having breakfast. She admits she was trying to eat as fast as she could. Yesterday she hardly ate, and that's why she's very hungry. Ju approaches and sits silently next to her on the sofa. After a moment of silence, Shin apologizes, explaining that she was sleeping so deeply and looked so tired that she didn't want to wake him. Besides, she feels guilty for having seen him so tired last night. She knows how much effort it cost him, that's why she thought he needed to rest well. Upon hearing this, Yu covers his head with his hands and then pulls her towards him, hugging her and telling her that it's not at all something she should apologize for. When Yu opened his eyes and saw that no one was nearby. At first he thought it had all been a dream, but everything felt too real to be a dream, so he worried that she had left because he made a mistake. Shin tells him she's very sorry and kisses him. Ju can't pull away from the girl and keeps kissing her while laying her down on the sofa. He gently caresses her face with his hand and asks if her words meant that she was hoping for him again. Shin feels as the atmosphere returns to how it was the previous night. That's why the girl jumps up and claims that now that she has satisfied her hunger, she can go to sleep. While taking off her robe, Yu says that when she says something like that, he can't ignore it. That's why. He promises he won't disappoint her. A while later, Yu takes Shin to a cafe to have a proper breakfast. He himself heads to the reception to change the departure date. The man acknowledges that he wants to spend more time with Shin when the opportunity arises. When he leaves, the protagonist throws herself on the table, so nervous that her heart is about to burst from her chest. She doesn't understand how people can look each other in the eyes after sleeping together, since she still feels very shy and embarrassed. She realizes that it's because she has always been a writer who prefers to stay at home. Director Che, on the other hand, acts completely naturally because he's used to making business contacts. The girl is starting to feel more and more that despite the age difference, they are actually different people. Shin doubts again if she really deserves someone like him, plus she still doesn't understand if they're dating. With all those thoughts, her head starts to hurt. The protagonist decides that now, all she needs is to do something to make Yu like her even more. She knows the surest method, and that's why she takes out her laptop from her backpack. When Yu asks why there's a computer on the table, the girl responds that she's going to work for a while. Before being a writer, she always dreamed of working in a hotel like this, and now she wants to note everything about her stay. But Yu abruptly closes the laptop and tells her she doesn't need to take notes. The girl doesn't understand why he suddenly says that, as she thought he would like her to work. The man gets the impression that Shin is using her desire to look for materials for work as an excuse to sleep with him, but he loudly asks if she really needs to work. When they came here to rest, he judges the girl to do something they can only do there. Unlike Shin, director Chia doesn't wear a swimsuit and stays seated on the lounge chair. The protagonist is sitting by the pool, happy to have prepared a list of necessities before arriving. Suddenly, a young man approaches her, apologizes, asks if she's alone, and invites her to his party. Shin replies that she's with a man, but the guy invites them both, since everyone there will be with partners. However, the next phrase confuses her, because the guy mentions that sometimes at those parties they switch partners. At first, it annoys her, but then she considers that she could gather a lot of material for her work there. The guy assures that she won't be disappointed and proposes to call her man to join them. Without warning, Yu appears behind Shin with his usually serious expression. He asks her in that tone if she really wants to go, making the guy's legs tremble. Claiming that they both don't fit the right age for his event, he quickly runs away. The two watch him in silence for a while. Then Shin asks Ju not to pay attention to his words since she didn't want to go anyway, and he murmurs that he didn't want to share his attention with anyone either. The man suddenly gets annoyed at feeling like one of those parents who fear letting their kids play near water, even though he's not even married. The couple returns to their room, and Ju, still dressed, enters his private pool and pulls Shin toward him. He tries to understand why the girl doesn't feel comfortable. After all, she herself wanted to play in the pool, and only here can she do it with him. Ju starts to doubt if Shin wanted to go after that guy. Blushing, the girl asserts that it's simply because it's too tight here. Shin suddenly stands up, but her foot slips on the bottom of the pool. Ju manages to grab her just in time and pull her out of the water. Approaching the girl, he tells her he thinks Shin doesn't quite understand what's happening around her. At first, he thought it was even adorable, but it's quite difficult for him to just sit and watch her stroll around the pool in that outfit. That's why it's better when they're alone and he doesn't have to worry about Shin, since there are other advantages here. The man takes off his wet shirt and moves closer to the heroine, because now that they are alone, he wants to finish what they couldn't do this morning. Suddenly, the atmosphere between them transforms. It's not that Shin didn't want it, but she didn't understand why he suddenly started. The girl thinks Ju is acting weird lately. He seems to have become somewhat aggressive, almost as if he's angry. The protagonist is saved thanks to an unexpected phone call. She says she needs to answer since her mother is calling. When asked why Shin hasn't returned home yet, she responds that her schedule changed. She asks her mother not to mention Sonu's name for now. When the woman asks who Shin is with now, the daughter replies that introducing him right now isn't entirely convenient, and we'll ask about that later. The girl talked for so long on the phone that Ju, without waiting for her, gets out of the pool. After the pool, they were very hungry, so they went to a cafe for lunch. The man offers her to try the soup, since Shin needs to eat well. As Yu speaks kindly to her again, the protagonist decides that he's no longer angry with her. He looks at her closely and seems to think she's okay now, although he scared her a bit before. Shin remembers that. Before arriving here, Ju said he was very tired. Since he had worked overtime for days now, he does everything for her. Despite the fatigue after lunch, Ju Wancha asks where she wants to go. For the girl, it takes a moment to understand his question, so she repeats it first. The protagonist wants to tell him where she wants to go, but then thinks that if she keeps taking him everywhere, she will tire him even more so. She says she wants to rest in the room for the rest of the time they're here. Upon returning to the room, Ju heads straight to the bedroom while Shin sits down to watch TV. However, she's interested in knowing what he's doing in the room, so she also enters the room and climbs into bed. She leans over him and watches him sleep. As she suspected, Shin is clearly very tired. Realizing they will leave tomorrow and not wanting to lose a minute by his side, she leans down to kiss him. However, the man suddenly opens his eyes and asks what she's doing. Ju says he was just lying here with his eyes closed. The guy suddenly opens his eyes and asks what she's doing. Ju says he was just lying here with his eyes closed. Not wanting to interrupt his rest, Shin rushes to leave him alone. But he grabs her shirt. He doesn't want to let her go. And he asks her to continue what she was going to do. Yuya regrets opening his eyes, so he lies back down, offering Shin to continue. The girl doesn't understand how it ended up like this, but she has no choice now. Shin decides to take the initiative and leans over him. She admits she noticed Yu was in a bad mood and felt like he was pressuring himself too much because of her. That's why he wanted to give her the opportunity to rest, but now she's willing to take care of everything. Shin is about to do what Yu did with her last night, but suddenly feels embarrassed in front of the man. Finally, it sinks in for the girl she's doing this only because she thinks he's too tired. It seems she'll have to tell him she was jealous for him to understand, but seeing what she's trying to do makes him think it's not so bad to be unbreakable. Joe smiles, grabs her hand, and offers to help her get through it after everything that happened lying together under the blanket. The man tells Shin not to worry because his tiredness disappears when he's with her. The girl suddenly says she thought of the brilliant method to get rid of the tiredness, smiling as she proposes to Yu to stop working. The man listens surprised to Shin, who is sure that this way he won't have to work overtime and will rest. When asked if he would then have money problems, the girl replies that she will write many novels and earn income from them so they can both live off the royalties. She'll just have to write a bunch of books. Yu decides not to tell her any more about how Shin the dreamer thinks that many writers get paid much more than she does. He only asks the girl if she understands that it sounds like a proposal, because she's offering to take responsibility for both of them. Shin hadn't thought about it that way. That's why she's feeling really shy now and insists she couldn't say something like that to a single man. Convinced, he asks her to forget it, especially since they're not in a serious relationship. Diju turns the young woman towards himself, and looking directly into her eyes, he states that he is serious, holding Shin's face with his hands, and acknowledging that at that moment, he seriously considered himself a confirmed bachelor in this recap manhwa. Back then, he wouldn't even dream of saying something like that. Thanks to Shin, his perspective changed. Even now, Diju feels insecurity and jealousy because of it. He understands that if he wants her to stay by his side, marriage isn't a bad idea after all. Meanwhile, in the city, night falls and Mrs. Q has already left work. One of her employees calls her and apologizes for yelling at her when leaving. Night falls and Mrs. Q has already left work. One of her employees calls her and apologizes for yelling at her when he left. He sent her a message, but she just walked away, so now the girl apologizes. Mrs. Q says she has a meeting already scheduled and turning around continues on her way.